President Lee Jae-myung has proposed upgrading South Korea's defense ties with NATO, calling for a new partnership that extends beyond arms sales to joint production and operations. A semiconductor export boom pushed South Korea's current account surplus to a record high in May, with June expected to deliver another exceptionally strong performance. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S.-Iran ceasefire is now over after the two sides exchanged fresh attacks and trade accusations of violating their deal. We begin in Turkey, where President Lee Jae-myung kicked off his NATO summit agenda by calling for deeper defense cooperation with the alliance at the Defense Industry Forum. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin, who is traveling with the president, reports from Ankara.
Korea is a trusted partner built on shared values and proven capabilities. That was President Lee Jae-myung's message as he made his NATO summit debut on Tuesday.
신뢰할 수 있는 파트너인 대한민국의 안정적인 생산 역량과 검증된 기술력이 나토의 오랜 노하우와 합쳐진다면 양쪽의 안보 역량은 지금보다 훨씬 강력해질 것이 분명합니다.
Speaking at the summit's flagship Defense Industry Forum, Lee said Korea and NATO share the painful memory of war and a common commitment to defending democracy, freedom, and peace. To further strengthen those ties, the president proposed upgrading defense industry cooperation in research and development.
단순히 무기 체계를 거래하는 현재 방산 협력을 넘어 무기 체계를 함께 연구하고 함께 생산하며 함께 운용하는 한 나토 방위 산업 파트너십 2.0으로 격상해 나가기를 제안합니다.
The Blue House says this would improve interoperability, reduce maintenance costs, and allow both sides to jointly upgrade defense systems. Korea and NATO also announced the launch of negotiations on a framework procurement agreement following talks between President Lee and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
Once the agreement is concluded, Korean companies will have an institutional foundation to participate in NATO's joint procurement market, estimated at around 15 trillion won, roughly $9.9 billion US.
In a separate meeting on the same day, NATO and its four Indo-Pacific partners, Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, agreed that cooperation among like-minded partners is becoming increasingly important. The group session was first introduced at last year's NATO summit in The Hague. The Blue House says President Lee's NATO trip is aimed at broadening Korea's diplomatic horizon, with a particular focus on expanding defense cooperation with the alliance, whose members account for more than half of global defense spending. He is expected to continue that effort on Wednesday through bilateral meetings with war leaders. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Ankara.
Staying in Ankara, President Lee Jae-myung held his first summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on the sidelines of the NATO summit on Wednesday. Zelenskyy thanked Korea for its pledge to provide $100 million in non-lethal support to help reconstruction in Ukraine. He responded that Seoul will continue to work with the international community until the war ends and peace is fully restored. Meanwhile, the Blue House announced that President Lee had a brief conversation with U.S. President Donald Trump at a reception and dinner hosted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan the previous day. The two leaders agreed to continue working-level consultations on President Trump's request for Korea to swiftly build 10 U.S. naval vessels, first raised when they met at last month's G7 summit. They also discussed arranging President Lee's visit to the U.S. at an appropriate time, with a round of golf expected to be part of the visit. Strong semiconductor exports are driving yet another economic record for Korea. The country posted its largest ever current account surplus in May, with an even bigger surplus expected in June. Kim Jun-hong reports.
Korea posted a record current account surplus in May, supported by robust semiconductor exports. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that the country's current account surplus reached $38.61 billion in May. The figure marked the largest monthly surplus on record, up by more than $10 billion from the previous month. This brought the January to May surplus to more than 4 times the level recorded in the same period last year. The country has now recorded current account surpluses for 37 consecutive months. Strong exports fueled the surplus as overall exports rose 62.9% on year. Semiconductors remained the key driver, with exports rising 167% to $37.29 billion, while exports of computer peripherals, including SSDs, soared nearly 250%. Exports to China saw the sharpest increase, with shipments to most other major markets also rising. Shipments to the Middle East, however, moved lower. Imports rose 22.2% from a year earlier, driven mainly by higher raw material purchases amid the Middle East conflict. But that was offset by even faster export growth. Wednesday's result follows months of strong trade surpluses.
Given the exceptionally large trade surplus in May, this strong current account result was largely expected. And since June's trade surplus was even bigger, the next current account report is also likely to remain strong.
A Bank of Korea official added that June's current account surplus is expected to reach around $40 billion, with this year's total likely to surpass earlier projections. Meanwhile, net financial assets saw their second largest increase on record. Foreign investors posted a record net sell-off in Korean equities, largely due to profit-taking after the recent market rally. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
The AI boom is driving unprecedented demand for memory chips, prompting Samsung Electronics and SK hynix to fast-track major semiconductor expansion projects. Our Park Jun-an takes us on site.
In Yongin, Gyeonggi-do Province, workers are busy erecting the steel pillars that will soon anchor the world's largest semiconductor megacluster. Right here on this ground, SK hynix is building its next-generation semiconductor cluster. The company will spend 600 trillion won, or roughly $390 billion to complete the project as early as 2033. The site will soon house 4 new fabrication plants to meet the booming demand for AI memory chips. Samsung Electronics is also stepping up its game in Yongin to fund future tech infrastructure. Though the designated site is currently empty, the area will soon transform into Samsung's mega semiconductor complex. The reason behind this aggressive bet is AI demand. The global AI race is moving faster than ever, and at the heart of this is a surging demand for high-performance memory semiconductors used for AI data centers. While explosive AI investments by global tech giants have brought massive capital into Korea's top 2 chip makers, a shortage of AI memory chips has raised concerns across the tech industry. Soaring prices have delivered record profits for chip makers in the short term. But an extended supply bottleneck could force tech giants to seek alternatives to expensive memory, potentially reshaping the market demands. To prevent supply bottlenecks and secure long-term market leadership, Samsung and SK hynix have significantly accelerated plans to complete their semiconductor clusters, which were originally slated for the 2040s. Plans are also underway to establish a second semiconductor hub in the country's southwest. For now, however, the Yongin clusters remain the centerpiece of the projects. Once completed, they could serve as Korea's core AI infrastructure, helping power the global AI era. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
July's extraordinary parliamentary session kicked off this week amid a political deadlock. The main opposition party has been boycotting proceedings in protest over the ruling party's unilateral formation of parliamentary committees. For more details, we have our political correspondent An Sung-jin with us. Welcome, Sung-jin.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
Sung-jin, let's start with the political deadlock. What's the situation like at the moment?
Right, so just as you mentioned, this month's extraordinary session has opened amid a political deadlock. The ruling Democratic Party has called for a plenary session to pass bills aimed at expanding renewable energy and strengthening support for vulnerable young people, mostly related to people's livelihoods. They further accused the main opposition People Power Party of holding the public's livelihoods hostage by refusing to participate in the proceedings.
There should be no standstill when people's livelihoods are at stake. No matter how much the People Power Party obstructs proceedings, it cannot stop the clock on people's livelihoods.
However, the PPP raises its criticism over the DP's formation of parliamentary committees. It argues that the ruling party pushed through the appointment of chairs for 11 of the special parliamentary committees without bipartisan consultation, calling the move an abuse of its parliamentary majority.
The Democratic Party has consistently sought to restrict people's freedoms. The People Power Party will stand firm in protecting those freedoms.
Now, despite the boycott, the DP says it will move ahead with activities in committees led by its lawmakers. The National Assembly's Finance Committee held its first meeting of the new parliamentary term on Tuesday without PPP members in attendance. The committee chair called on PPP lawmakers to return before the committee's next meeting tomorrow, saying economic and livelihood issues should transcend partisan politics. With both sides standing firm, July's parliamentary session is set to begin as a divided legislature, raising concerns over delays to key policy and economic legislation.
And Song-jin, in the meantime, what else has been at the center of attention at the National Assembly? Tell us more.
Right, so the special committee investigating into the ballot shortage during the June 3rd local elections conducted on-site inspections of the National Election Commission and the Seoul Metropolitan Election Commission on Tuesday. Following the inspections, lawmakers from both parties criticized election officials for delayed reporting, poor crisis management, and failures in communication after it became clear that there would be a ballot shortage. They questioned why election headquarters took time to recognize the seriousness of the situation and further highlighted breakdowns in reporting and oversight between local and national election authorities. The committee also held an expert forum this morning, which is on Wednesday, to examine the causes and discuss possible structural reforms to the country's election management system. Now, the National Assembly is also looking to introduce a special counsel bill to investigate the matters further, but rival parties remain at odds over how to appoint a special prosecutor. Now, the DP calls for an independent third party, such as the Korean Bar Association, to recommend the special prosecutor, arguing that the method would ensure political neutrality. However, the PPP insists the recommendation should come from the opposition party, saying the investigation must remain free from government and ruling party influence.
Well, lastly, Song-jin, as the National Convention for the DP approaches, candidates have officially been announcing their candidacy, right?
Right, so the National Convention for the DP is set to take place on August 17th, which is about a month away, and the leadership race is looking to be at least a four-way race. Now, former Prime Minister Kim Min-seok officially declared his candidacy earlier this week, and lawmakers Song Young-il and Ko Min-jung have also put their names forward today. Now, former DP Chairman Chung Chung-rae, who has stepped down from his post, is also likely to bid for another term as party leader.
Well, the National Assembly indeed has so much going on, which we have to keep an eye on. Song-jin, thanks for coming in tonight.
My pleasure, as always.
A fragile peace between the U.S. and Iran appears to be unraveling, with both sides exchanging strikes and accusing each other of violating last month's memorandum. And just moments ago, U.S. President Donald Trump himself said it's over. Kim Do-yeon has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the fragile Middle East ceasefire is over, speaking on Wednesday local time from the NATO summit in Ankara following a dramatic escalation in the Gulf.
As far as I'm concerned, it's over. I'll speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them.
The president's remarks come after a rapid exchange of military strikes from both sides. The flare-up began when U.S. Central Command struck more than 80 targets inside Iran, targeting air defense networks, coastal radar systems, and anti-ship missile capabilities. Washington stated that the offensive was a direct response to recent Iranian attacks on commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Iran immediately retaliated by launching missile and drone strikes against United States military bases in Bahrain and Kuwait. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced on Wednesday local time that its naval and aerospace forces targeted 85 U.S. military facilities across the two nations, while also claiming to have shot down an American MQ-9 drone. In response to the incoming Iranian projectiles, authorities in Bahrain and Kuwait activated air defense systems early Wednesday, with Bahrain issuing air raid sirens and urging residents to take immediate shelter. Alongside the military actions, Washington has ramped up economic penalties, with the U.S. Treasury revoking a 60-day sanctions waiver that had temporarily exempted Iranian crude oil and petrochemical exports. Iran's foreign ministry has fiercely condemned the sanctions move, claiming the U.S. revocation violates Article 10 of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding less than 20 days after it was signed. Tehran has accused Washington of bad faith, declaring it'll take all necessary measures to protect its national security. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Shipbuilding cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. is gathering pace, with Washington reportedly seeking details on Korean shipbuilders' capacity to construct naval vessels. Lee Ju-yeon explains.
The United States has reportedly requested information to Korean shipbuilders to assess their naval vessel construction and design capabilities. According to defense industry sources on Wednesday, the U.S. Department of Defense and the Navy recently issued requests for information to Korean shipbuilders, covering vessels such as destroyers and fleet replenishment ships. An RFI is a formal process used by the government to gather market data, including pricing, delivery timelines, and other information needed for project planning. In response, Korea's two major naval shipbuilders, HD Hyundai Heavy Industries and Hanwha Ocean, reportedly submitted details of their combat ship design and construction capabilities to the Pentagon last month. Samsung Heavy Industries has also entered the race, joining the two frontrunners for the U.S. Navy medium-sized naval tanker project. The move aligns with President Trump's push to revive the U.S. shipbuilding industry through the MASCA initiative, short for Make American Shipbuilding Great Again, as well as his continued interest in Korean shipbuilding.
We are thinking about contracting some ships. They build them very well in South Korea. They're also thinking about coming to our country with some shipyards to start us on the process of building ships.
This marks the first time the U.S. has formally inquired about Korean shipbuilders' naval capabilities through an RFI. According to a Kotra report released last year, the U.S. needs 364 new ships by 2054 to strengthen its naval power, averaging around 12 ships per year. The RFI process is drawing sharp attention after President Trump directly asked Korean President Lee Jae-myung at last month's G7 summit whether Korea could quickly build 10 U.S. warships.
미국 군함 열척을 빠르게 건조해 줄 수 있겠느냐 이런 의사를 저한테 물어봤습니다. 물론 거기에 대해서 당연히 가능하고 최선을 다하겠다고 답해 드렸습니다.
This strongly suggests the U.S. is moving beyond high-level presidential messaging and has officially begun concrete working-level reviews through its Department of Defense and Navy. The move follows an early bilateral agreement to set aside $150 billion from Korea's $350 billion U.S. investment package for shipbuilding cooperation. Lee Ju-yeon, Arirang News.
During RIMPAC around the Hawaiian island, the P-8 Poseidon aircraft's advanced anti-submarine warfare capabilities were showcased during ROK-U.S. joint drill. Our Kim Bo-kyung files this report.
Finding a submarine in the vast ocean is like finding a needle in a haystack. That is what the P-8 Poseidon does, dubbed the silent submarine killer, engaging mainly in anti-submarine warfare. During the ongoing Rim of the Pacific 2026, the ROK and U.S. Navy jointly conducted P-8 operations to enhance interoperability and operational capabilities with a simulated submarine target.
I'm on board the P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft capable of carrying around 120 sonogroups. This marks the very first time the media has been given access to capture the Poseidon carrying out an operational mission.
In less than 30 minutes after the search began, the P-8 had successfully detected and tracked the target. As the submarine failed to surface following a warning signal, the P-8 descended to about 1,000 feet above the ocean and simulated dropping an Mk-54 lightweight torpedo from its weapons bay. Proving itself as the most capable maritime patrol aircraft in the world, P-8 boasts roughly twice the acoustic capability of the P-3 and about 1.5 times more sonar buoys. The U.S. captain also points out the importance of seamless data sharing between the two allies, while the ROK Navy vowed firm readiness to deal with any future threat with the U.S.
So that's really the goal when we're here at RIMPAC, is to build those connections, because it is important for those turnover times so that we can execute and do it efficiently, properly, and professionally.
With world-class maritime patrol aircraft and advanced tactical capabilities, we will remain fully prepared to respond rapidly to any threat in the maritime domain.
While highlighting P-8's advanced capabilities, the two allies have highlighted the importance of allied cooperation during the RIMPAC period. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Honolulu.
As Korea's migrant population grows, efforts to connect newcomers with local communities are gaining importance. And as part of that effort, a Buddhist temple here in Seoul hosts migrant workers from Laos, using a shared faith to help build a small but meaningful connection. Our Park Jae-ryung tells us more.
Agricultural workers from Laos sit with their hands neatly folded, bow in prayer and listen attentively as a Buddhist monk shares teachings of the Dharma. Quiet and reserved at first, many appear calm as they encounter a familiar faith in a different cultural setting. The migrants have been invited to a temple in Seoul to experience Korean Buddhist culture. The group then took part in a lotus lantern making session. Before the activity began, an instructor explained that although the lotus flower blooms from muddy waters, it remains pure, making it a powerful symbol in Buddhism.
I've always liked lotus flowers, but making one myself felt special. After spending most of my time working in Korea, joining a Buddhist event like this reminded me of home and helped me feel a little more connected to Korea.
As an interpreter guides them through each step, they then carefully glue together paper petals and leaves before placing a small light inside, gradually bringing their lotus lanterns to life.
I've taken part in many Buddhist events in Laos, but this is the first time I ever made a lotus lantern like this in Korea. I'm really happy to be here and take part in this event with my friends.
Then, a Korean percussion performance began. The participants clapped, cheered, and filmed a Nanta-style drum and samulnori performances on their phones. They were then invited to try the instruments themselves, quickly becoming immersed in the rhythms as performers and spectators came together as one. Later, the participants sat down for tea and traditional refreshments prepared by the organizers. They carefully poured and shared tea, experiencing another aspect of Korean temple culture. For migrants who may still miss home, the event offered a chance to better understand Korea through a familiar faith. Through a shared Buddhist tradition, this little culture exchange offers a small but meaningful step toward bringing migrants and local communities closer together. Park Jae-ryung, Arirang News.
Rain will continue nationwide through tomorrow evening. Heavy rain advisories are also in effect across parts of the central regions and Gyeongsang-Buk-do province. While the rain has taken the edge of the heat in some places, heat advisories are in effect across much of the Gyeongsang-do provinces. And for the first time this season, Gyeongsan, Chilgok, and Uiseong in Gyeongsang-Buk-do province are under tropical night advisories. If you're in the southern regions, it'll feel as hot as around 33 degrees Celsius, so it's important to stay hydrated. By tomorrow, the Chungcheongdo and Jeolla-do provinces could pick up more than 200 millimeters of rain, while the central regions and the Gyeongsang-Buk-do province could see more than 150 millimeters of rain. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 24 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 25 degrees, Busan 23 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 27 degrees, Chuncheon 26, Daegu 33 degrees. Once the rain moves out, temperatures will climb again and the summer heat will make a strong comeback. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.